Well, think of this group. So he found readers where other newspaper publishers saw a threat. Immigrants were pouring into New York at that point at an unprecedented rate. By the end of the decade, 80% of the city's population was foreign or foreign-born. So the staff struggles to match the journal, didn't have the same resources. But what's important here is the epic doesn't pit Hearst against Pulitzer. Rather, it's Hearst against Pulitzer's leaderless troops in a helter-skelter 24-hour-a-day competition. The world was losing its battle with the journal and losing it badly. The newspaper that had once set the agenda for the city and sometimes for the nation was engaged in a futile game of catch-up. It's been beaten on its own dunghill by the journal, which has bigger type, bigger pictures, bigger war scares, and a bigger bluff town topics, gleefully reported. They hated Pulitzer. If Mr. Pulitzer had his eyesight, he would not be content to play second fiddle to the journal and allow Mr. Hearst to set the tone. By the time Pulitzer comes back to New York, the battle is lost in many ways. From his command post of his house up on 73rd Street, he tries to fix what ailed the world. He reorganizes the staff, tries to put in charge editors with the courage to cease imitating Hearst. Confident he's got the guy in place, he turns to the question of the day. Should the United States go to war? And he writes an editorial. There's no doubt, of course, the journal's championing for war. The Sun said the war couldn't come soon enough. Every major metropolitan newspaper that I could find favored war or a threat of war if Spain didn't comply with American demands. Pulitzer joins this chorus. But if you read it carefully, he does so supporting war only as a last resort. And the reason is, I want to share with you a small anecdote. 3 years before, a similar crisis occurred between the United States and another world power. And how Pulitzer reacted then, I think, is far more telling about his belief than his minor role on the sidelines of the Spanish-American War. In 1895, a discovery of gold intensified a quarrel between Venezuela and Great Britain about its border with British Guiana. Seems minor, but remember Gulf of Tonkin was minor. The United States took Venezuela's side, broke off diplomatic relations with England in late 1895 and demanded arbitration. The British, of course, who ruled the sea at that point, considered this an insult to come from our end of the side of the Atlantic, and the rebuff drew an angry message from President Cleveland to Congress. Invoking the Monroe Doctrine, he promised that if England dared to take any land the United States deemed belonging to Venezuela, the United States would resist by every means in its power. Congress rushed to the president's side, and saber-rattling put this little notice thing on the front page newspapers. War on every lip was the Chicago Tribune's headline. War clouds proclaimed the Atlanta Constitution. The editorial pages clamored for a fight. Any American citizen who hesitates to uphold the President of the United States is either an alien or a traitor, said the Sun. Theodore Roosevelt, bless his little soul, was then New York City Police Commissioner. He was thrilled with the prospect of war. He was convinced that the entire nation, not to mention Manhattan, lacked virility. He thought the time had come for the United States to flex its military muscle beyond its borders, and he saw the opportunity in this crisis. Roosevelt, mind you, who had never yet seen a battlefield, wanted war. Pulitzer, who had, wanted none of it. He refused to let the world join in the clamor for war. He thought Cleveland, the man who he helped elect, had gone too far. He put a headline, "Grave Blunder," on the lead editorial. Great Britain's actions in Venezuela pose no danger to the United States, he said. It's a grave blunder to put this government in its attitude of threatening war unless we mean it and are prepared for it and can hopefully appeal to the sympathizers of the civilized world in making it. He then expanded his effort to douse the war. Over his signature, the staff sent telegrams to leading statesmen, clergymen, politicians, editors, leaders in Parliament, all throughout England. They responded by saying they wanted peace. He managed to get this published in his paper. Roosevelt, of course, lost his chance for war, tempers cooled, and the war didn't occur. So this brings me to the final point. In the end, Pulitzer and Hearst survived that intense circulation war of 1898. But their rivalry has become almost as famous in history books as the Spanish-American War itself. Pulitzer was indissolubly linked with Hearst as a purveyor of yellow journalism. And in fact, many people surmise that that minor journalism school I mentioned and the prize was an attempt to cleanse his legacy. I think his motives are a little different, and I like to leave you with the thought that Pulitzer in many respects is what I term the midwife of the birth of the modern mass media. He was one of the first media lords to recognize the vast social changes that were triggered by the Industrial Revolution and to capitalize on them by harnessing the converging elements of mass entertainment, technology, and changes in printing and communication. By filling his newspapers with stories of human interest and sensation harvested from urban life, he radically changed the focus of news by reporting on matters relating directly to his readers. Like many brilliant ideas, this is a notion that strikes one as common sense today, but was radical in his time. He made news into a commodity, as Ted Turner repeated a century later when he built CNN. He was not an inventor. He's not like Edison. Rather, he possessed this kind of foresight. And I'd leave you with this final thought. Just as Picasso was not the only painter to launch the Cubist movement, Pulitzer was not the only publisher to usher in the modern mass media, but he was its Picasso. Thank you.